Welcome in, everybody. We're going to get started here, and let's say I'll start right at 5:01. Got a lot to get to. So I'm starting to see some more people. Thanks for coming, everybody. Get started in just a minute. Alrighty. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on this, what at least is for me, a particularly hot Tuesday evening. I hope that you are somewhere cool, preferably up north somewhere. Welcome to the Rural Energy for America program, Solar Grants for Arizona Farms and Rural Businesses webinar. We're really glad that you're here, whether you are a business owner, a farmer, whether you work in the solar industry or you're none of those and you're just curious about this program. We're really thankful that you're spending some of your evening with us. This webinar will be about an hour, including Q&A. Feel free to take notes and screenshots as we go along, but we will be emailing out a recording of this to everybody who RSVP'd. A couple logistics to get us started. We are in webinar mode, so if you are a participant, we can't hear you, but we want to be able to answer your questions. At the bottom of your screen, you'll notice a Q&A button. If you have questions for any of the speakers on the panel, please use that Q&A button to type your questions in as we go. And there's also a chat button. Everybody on the call can see that, so feel free to use that for chatting with other attendees. Use the Q&A button for questions for the speakers. My name is Adrian Keller. If we haven't met yet, I'm the Arizona Program Director for Solar United Neighbors. I'm based out of Phoenix, and I've been in this role for about 6 months, been with the organization for about 18 months now. I oversee our Arizona program for Solar United Neighbors. That includes our co-ops, our advocacy work, our nonprofit work. If it touches Arizona, I'm probably involved in it somewhere. Emma Searson is also joining us tonight. She's our policy and advocacy campaigner for the West region at SUN. She'll be walking us through what the Rural Energy for America program is. I'm very pleased that Jessie Huff was able to join us tonight. She's the Arizona Energy Coordinator for the USDA Rural Development. Jessie helps administer the program here in Arizona and has seen dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds probably, of REAP applications. So she'll be able to answer a lot more of our technical questions tonight. And also very thankful that Tom Pitts was able to join us from Tom Pitts Consulting, as well as the Arizona Association of Economic Development. Tom's going to talk a little bit about his experience helping Page Springs Winery get a REAP grant and tell us what that experience was like on the other side as a REAP grant recipient. So if you're new to Solar United Neighbors, I'd like to tell you a little bit about who we are and what we're all about. We are a membership-based national nonprofit organization with field staff in 12 states, as well as Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. We organize primarily around solar policy issues. We ourselves are not a solar installer. In fact, we're a vendor-neutral organization. We focus on consumer advocacy, solar education, and outreach in the community. You may have heard of us from our solar co-ops. They're a really big part about what we do as an organization. Those are those group purchasing campaigns for groups of folks to go solar together at the same time. That's mostly focused on residential rooftop solar installations, but certainly we help. Our goal really, we want to help everybody be able to go solar, and that includes our friends up in rural Arizona and our small business community as well. SUN as an organization has been around since 2007, where we originally started, grown that since then to 15 states and territories. And since 2007, we've been able to help more than 8,000 families across the US go solar. And together they've installed more than 68 megawatts of rooftop solar out on the grid. So our mission at Sun is to help people go solar, join together, and fight for their energy rights. So we help people go solar both through our group buying solar co-ops, but also individuals. That includes homeowners, businesses, nonprofits, farms, churches, a list that is constantly growing. And we bring people together. That includes this webinar we're having right now, our solar co-ops. We have solar 101s, happy hours, lobbying days. We provide multitude of resources to help solar enthusiasts effectively advocate for their rights. And when we talk about energy rights or solar rights, that covers policies like community solar, so renters can access solar, making sure HOA members have access to rooftop solar, fighting for fair solar tax credits, and fighting to protect programs like this, like REAP in the federal farm bill. Lots of fights that go on across the country that we're involved in to protect solar federally, but also right here in Arizona. Awesome. I'm going to pass it over to Emma now to talk about what REAP is.
Great. Thank you so much, Adrienne. And again, hello, everyone. My name is Emma Searson. I am going to go ahead and jump into a little bit about what REAP is and how it might help you. So first things first, what REAP stands for. REAP stands for the Rural Energy for America program. It's a federally funded grant and loan program, and it helps farmers as well as rural business owners access renewable and efficient energy technologies. So it was established back in 2002 through the federal farm bill. And because of that, it is administered to this day by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, or USDA's Office of Rural Development, which you might hear people just call RD. So REAP provides both grants and loans, and both of those can fund a really wide range of clean energy technologies. But in this webinar, to keep things simple and focused, we are just going to narrow in on REAP grants and REAP grants for solar projects specifically. So there are quite a few reasons that any rural small business owner or farmer should be thinking about whether solar might be right for them, and also considering a REAP grant to help them access solar. So I just want to touch on those before we get into the nitty-gritty of the program. So first, when you go solar, you will inherently enjoy so much more energy choice and energy freedom because you are getting to decide where your energy comes from, and you have the opportunity to make it yourself. And because you're making it yourself, going solar can also really substantially reduce your business's energy costs. And beyond just reducing those costs immediately, it can also help you predict and control those costs better in the long run, because you will just be less dependent on things like oil and gas prices, which, as we have all seen in the last few years, can really fluctuate over time, and that can have a huge impact on your business. And on a related note, powering your business with solar can improve your energy security. So not only will you be better insulated from oil and gas prices, you can also be better insulated from things like power outages that might interrupt your business operations, especially if you consider going solar and pairing that solar with on-site battery storage. So that resilience benefit is something to keep in mind too. I in many ways thinks it goes without saying that going solar also enables you to just take advantage of this really abundant natural energy resource that doesn't pollute, and that is its own freestanding benefit. And then on top of all of those pros, solar has gotten a lot more affordable, certainly in my lifetime and in the last decade specifically, as the technology has matured. And if you consider going solar with a REAP grant, you'll also have the chance to save up to 50% on the total cost of going solar. That's what a REAP grant can take off for you. So it really makes it more affordable than ever. And if you receive a REAP grant, you can still take advantage of some other federal incentives out there. So that includes the federal tax credit for businesses, or ITC, which can knock another 30% off of your out-of-pocket costs, or more, depending on a few factors. And you can still take advantage of accelerated depreciation and those other financial tools. So lots of good reasons to be thinking about this. And there are a few changes to REAP that have gone into effect in the last year or so that are also worth highlighting. So REAP grants have always been in really high demand. Historically, this has been such a popular program that the budget was just nowhere near big enough to fund every project application. In fact, it was very far from it. But thanks to the recent passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, which passed last year, the program is now receiving an unprecedented level of investment. So it just means there's a lot more funding to go around than there have been in years past. Specifically, the IRA quadrupled funding for REAP over the next 10 years, and it also lifted the cap that limits how large of a grant any one project can receive. So that cap used to be set at 25% of a project's total costs, and that cap has since been lifted to up to 50% of a project's total cost. One important note on that, though, is that the new 50% cap only applies to projects using technologies just like solar that do not emit any greenhouse gases on site. If you're talking about a technology that does lead to emissions on site, the 25% limit would still apply. So if you only remember one thing from my portion of this presentation so far, I want it to be that a REAP grant can help you power your farm or rural business with solar and do so affordably. So as I mentioned, there's just so much more REAP funding to go around than there has been in the past. And you also have the opportunity to win a much bigger grant than you could have in years past. So this is really a historic opportunity for farmers and rural small businesses in Arizona, and there has not been a better time to apply historically. So that's mostly it from me. Before I pass it off, though, to our next speaker, Jesse, to talk you all through how to apply for REAP, I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of the application guide Solar United Neighbors put together to guide you through the REAP grant application process, really step by step. This is just a screenshot of one page. You can see that it's a super detailed guide. So in addition to getting the advice of the experts we have with us today, I hope you will just head to our website if you haven't already and download that guide so you have it next to you when you're ready to apply. The URL is just solarunitedneighbors.org/REAP. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Jesse.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Adrian and Emma. Okay, so one of the things I also want to say is that the money that the IRA gave us is only for 5 years of applications, because once you apply, if you get awarded, you have 2 years to do your project. So the money that we got to use over a 10-year span, we are anticipating using it all within the first 5 years to give the projects time to be completed. Okay, so how do you apply for REAP? I would say first thing is you make sure you're in an area of 50,000 people or less, and that you are considered a rural small business. So most businesses are small, in my experience. You have to be very big to not be small. But there is a link that we have in our guides, and I have in an email I send out, where you can go to the SBA, the Small Business Administration website, and look up your business by its NAICS code, the North American code that classifies businesses into categories. It's usually found on your taxes. And so you'd want to make sure that you're in a rural area and that you're a small business, or that you are an agricultural producer. And that means that 51% of your income on your taxes comes from ag. We don't want to see your taxes, but you don't want to lie to us, right? So you want to make sure that you're either an ag producer or a small business. And yeah, and we have all those links for you that we can provide later to make sure that you're eligible. Once you know you're eligible, then you probably want to start looking for a quote. You want to get your technical documents together. You want to know what you want to build, know how much it costs. You know, if you do want to do a different type of project, we can talk about that. But in general, most of solar PV in the state of Arizona, most of our contractors have worked with REAP before. So if you tell them that you're trying to apply for a REAP grant, they might also be able to provide a little assistance. But they're going to make you up a technical packet that's going to tell you how quickly it would pay back for your business, how much it'll cost, and what types of equipment, what spec sheets of equipment they would include. To do that well and to help them out, you might want to go ahead and gather 12 months of utility bills to give to them. Sorry, I'm off slides, Emma, but that would help them be able to see what your historic load is, so that they can not just design the solar system based on your roof or the space that you might want it in, but also to offset your energy properly through the course of a year. So that's why those utility bills are really important. And for our application process, they are also required if you're going to be claiming historic energy use. Another thing that you're going to want to do is go ahead and sign up for a SAMS account. If you have never had that before, this is going to feel like foreign language. But basically, there's a website, and you register on this website. It's free. So there are a lot of scams out there. Don't pay anybody to do SAMs for you over the internet. And it's going to ask you a lot of questions. You're going to sign forms, and you're going to put in your bank account information, and then what that does is it verifies for us, the people looking at your grant, processing your grant, that you've already been approved to receive a grant by the federal government. So it really is one of your first steps. We hope that when you apply for REAP, you already have an active SAM registration. That would be ideal. Sometimes SAMs is slow, backlogged a little. If that happens and you're ready to submit your application, but you don't have a SAM registration finalized yet, that's okay too. You would submit the emails of the emails you've been having with SAM in your application packet to show us that you're on the track and SAM is the one holding you up, and we accept that. Yes, so go ahead.
One quick question here on this. Did the SAM account number turn over to the new DUNS number? Sure.
I think they're calling it the UEI number now. There has been a lot of changes. People who've been around a long time will remember a DUNS number and a cage code. There are no DUNS numbers anymore, as far as I understand. And the cage code now is an optional choice when you're signing up, but you do not need a cage code for REAP. You just need an active SAM registration. And I think that usually that will equate to what they're calling a unique identity ID, which is the UEI number. It's about a 10 numbers, letters and numbers mixed together, 10 digits. And so, yeah, so that's kind of your basic, you're got to get your quote. You want to know what you want to build, know how much it costs, because you need that for the application. And when you sit down and you start on your application, if you get stuck, that we have some people you can call, myself. Hopefully we're going to have more technical advisors in the state that can help. But it is a little meticulous. You have to walk through it, make sure everything matches. If your dollar amount on one form doesn't match the dollar amount on the other, I have to send it back to you. So, take your time with it. It's confusing also because our government forms sometimes don't make very much sense. They're kind of catch-all forms. There will be places that you won't know the answer to. That's okay. Some of them can even be left blank when they really don't apply to our program. In other places, it's very technical for people, and it can be confusing. Our main application is used for all these different technologies, including energy efficiency. So there's whole sections of our main application that if you're applying for solar, you won't even use it because it's only for energy efficiency. So, you know, it takes a little while to acquaint yourself with how these forms are laid out, but you know, we have people hopefully to help you. And then hold on, what was the last part of that? The last two bullets there. Oh yeah. So you are going to need to contact your utility, especially if your project is large. At the time of your application, we're not requiring that you have a, you know, signed document with the utility, but we want to know that they know that you want to put solar there and that there are no hidden costs at the utility level that you might not know about. For financial documentation, you do need to show that you can pay for this project 100%, because the REAP grant is actually reimbursed to you. After the project is paid for and built, we deposit the grant into the checking account, you know, an electronic deposit. So you'd have to send in photos and all your receipts and all of that. So people don't usually get the grant for a few months after the project is done and paid for. And then the proof of insurance is also something that in our regulation, it says that it needs to be submitted with the application, but in reality, we need to see the proof that you've added your solar to your insurance after it's built. So what we do is we condition for it. If you apply and you get awarded, we condition for that before you receive the grant, before we release the money. Okay. Ready for the next one? Yeah, so this SF 424, 424C, 424D, these are government forms that are used in all programs. So the SF 424, sometimes there will be things on there that won't even make sense to what you're trying to fill out. So just fill out everything you can as best as you can. And then the environmental checklist is, it takes a long time to put all the information in there that is needed, and you have to follow links and go through reports. But again, there are people that you can call to get help if you get stuck on that, but it is a requirement for a complete application. And I don't want to go into environmental law in detail here, but in general, rooftop solar is fairly easy to pass an environmental review. When you would want to be cautious of, you know, when you would want to talk to us in advance about your project and specifically about environmental is if you're doing something large and turning up ground that has not been turned up yet. And okay, so REAP was designed to really let farmers kind of roll with getting solar and these energy efficiency projects in. And so unlike a lot of grants, once you have a complete application submitted, you actually could go ahead and do your project without knowing if you're going to get the grant. The competition hasn't happened. You have no security that you're going to get the grant, but some people are going to do the project no matter what. And REAP is very unique. You are allowed to do that. But I tell everybody, please don't do that until we are sure that you have a complete application, because once you spend money, you can't reapply. Yeah. And we are really busy, so be patient with me. in my replies. And I think, is there one, do I have one more?
That's all the ones I have for you, Jesse, but if there's anything you want to go back to, I'm happy to follow you around.
No, I mean, I think we could turn it over to Tom to talk about his experience, and then we can answer questions. And
Well, I think we're in big trouble now, if you're turning it over to me. Let me talk to you a little bit about the process. I've written a few of these grants, and you know, I work with various organizations around the state, but I've written a number of grants with the USDA, including REAP grants. And I'm one of those guys that thinks if you can spend 50-cent dollars, that's a lot better than spending dollars. So if it's a reimbursable grant, as this is, and you can get 50% of that cost back, that's a giant step forward in your bottom line. But I want to say something, one thing to add on to what Jesse said. This is not a poverty grant. This is not a startup, oh my gosh, I don't have any money, what am I going to do kind of grant. This is a case where this is a grant designed for going concerns, so that once you're in business and you've established your your business model and your business activity, this is an opportunity to step in and cut your operating cost dramatically. Power is something we all pay for, and to be able to cut that cost in half or more is really an astonishing step in the right direction. Now, because of other programs that are out there, including tax incentives and so on, it's quite common that these the cost of the installation of the entire solar system will probably not cost you in the long run more than about 25% of the real cost. There are tax credits, there's the grant itself, and in most of the programs that I've looked at, the payback, the straight out-of-pocket payback, typically runs about 5 years because of the money saved and applying that to what the cost of the program is. So anyway, one of the first things you want to do, Jesse touched on part of this, take a look at your business operation, see what you're spending on power, find out what the real incentive is to be able to take yourself off the grid for that portion of it. Anytime you can lower that cost over time, and most of the programs I've looked at, typically when you install this equipment, it's going to be in place for at least 15 years. And when you're talking about cutting, your power cost for 15 years, I don't know about you, but that works for me. I'll take that all day long. Anytime you can make that work. So the pictures that we're looking at, these are a couple of pictures of the program we did for Page Springs Cellars, which is one of the wineries here in the Verde Valley where I am. And the first part that we put in was the series of panels that you see. That's actually above the parking lot. We put covered parking in place for the visitors and so on to the winery. There you go. And that was the first part of the project, was round one. We moved on later to a second piece to the puzzle, part two, and added the rooftop cellar with the actual winery facility. Altogether, there's something like 125 kilowatts worth of power involved here. That really is a major program. There is a third round that we're looking forward to now, which is adding the solar batteries so that we can really store power and make it truly a 24-hour operation for the entire situation. Page Springs Cellars is one of the very active wineries here in the state. If you're not familiar with the wine development, we were late to the game in Arizona. Arizona had their own bit of prohibition that took place before federal, and they just never quite got around to doing anything about it for a long, long time. And so our wine industry here was late to develop, even though we were probably the first place in the United States to actually begin producing wine, thanks to our Spanish friends way back in the day. But now, and since we made some law changes in 05 and 06, thanks to the Supreme Court saying, hey, you can't do that sort of thing, we were able to finally open that door. And since then, we've established some 125 new wineries in the state of Arizona. And so as it happens, I'm in the process of doing a study right now for the Arizona Office of Tourism with Northern Arizona University to demonstrate just how far that's gone. The last study we did in 2017, we showed that from dead stop in 2006, this industry was already bringing over 600,000 visitors to rural Arizona every year. The new study won't be released until the end of September, but I'll give you a sneak peek and let you know that we're going to be talking 7 figures now. So that's a giant, giant step forward. And every single one of those vineyards is in an area that qualifies for a REAP grant. All of these vineyards are out in rural Arizona under the $50,000 population requirement. So I'm looking forward to seeing more and more people taking advantage of that program. But what it does is it gives you continuity, it gives you control of your cost, it gives you a dramatic saving, and the grant itself, you know, I don't want Jesse to scare you away. The grant itself is really pretty straightforward. If you have an operating business, you obviously have the numbers at hand of what it takes to operate your business. That's going to be necessary to complete your application. Typically, they're going to want to look at about 3 years of business records to see how your business has been doing and to see what it really qualifies for. But I'll go back to what I started with. If anytime I can do a project with dollar bills that only cost me 50 cents, that looks to me like a great opportunity for going forward. And I must say, I've done a number of projects with the USDA Rural Development Office in Arizona, and they have been great to work with. Jesse's been a great addition to the program, and they're in process now bringing some other people on board to make it even easier and quicker. But once everything is really approved, they're pretty quick to get the money out and to put it back in your pocket, and to take a look and see how it's going, to be able to help show other people around the state just how impactful this program can be. As someone who has written some of these grants and helped a number of people with these programs, I've got to tell you, this is one of the great programs out there right now. And it is not tied to anything except what can you do to make your operation more efficient, save you some money, and make everything move forward. So I'll be happy to answer any questions, but I've been writing these grants for a while, and I think it really is a great program. I support it 100%.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Jesse. Really appreciate it. We've got some good questions coming in the Q&A. We'll start with this one. How does REAP work for businesses who don't own and lease a building? Sorry, how can businesses who don't own and lease a building use this grant? In other words, if the business doesn't own their building, but they lease their building.
Okay. We can do that still if you plan to stay in that location and you have a lease that, I don't know what it is, 4 years, 7 years, but it says it can be re-upped. And if the owner of that building is willing to work with you to build solar into the lease. I'm going to use an example of a project that this has occurred with in the past. So there was a restaurant in a multi-use building. There's probably 10 businesses in the building. But the restaurant wanted to put solar on the roof of this building and pay for it. And they were renting, you know, they had a lease. And the owner of the building and the restaurant owner made up a new lease, an addendum to the current lease that said that if they did leave that facility, that they would restore the roof to its original condition. But mind you, they had no intent to change locations. And the building owner had no intent to stop renting to them. So it is possible. We're not against it, but we do need you with your application to submit that lease agreement that states that the owner of the building is okay with what you're proposing. And we don't necessarily need the lease to be for 20 years or a very long period, but for whatever that lease is, it needs to say that there is an option to re-up the lease continually into the future. Because one of the language around the regulation for us is that it's the useful life of the system. So we have to show that if we help pay for this grant for this solar system, that it will exist and function for the life of the system is the goal.
Awesome, thank you. Really good question from Cameron here. Says, I own a small 4-acre urban farm and farmers market in Chandler. I am not in a rural area. I saw on page 6 that urban farms can apply. Should I? Can I? How does that work?
Yeah, so what you would need to be able to show and be confident of is that 51% of your income comes from agricultural production. And if that is true, then you are what we would consider an agricultural producer. And so, yes, you can apply. Even we did a vertical aquaponic farm in downtown Portland. So you can participate in the program. And I would just ensure that that 51% of your income has come from ag for at least one whole year, but hopefully more than one. We used to require 3 years of tax returns with the application to prove this. And in an effort to make REAP easier to access, we are now having you self-certify this. So we're not, unless you have a big application that's over $200,000, we're not requiring you to submit that to us. We're trusting you to ensure that you meet that criteria.
Perfect. Thank you, Jesse. This next question just says, where can people get a quote? I'm not sure if that's like a solar installer quote or what quote they're referring to.
Probably. I get that question a lot. I wish I had a really good map or a very comprehensive list that I could send out, but I don't have those things. Solar United Neighbors might be able to help. And I do have a little bit of a list, depending on where you are, will depend if I have someone in there. But what I usually say to people is look around your neighborhood. If you see a solar system somewhere, go ask them who did it.
Mm-hmm.
Find out who in your neighborhood is doing solar.
And there are a number of very good solar installers in Arizona, so that this is a good location for it. That's great advice, Jesse.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. Ask your neighbors, ask who's around you. And Alondra, if you need any help trying to find a solar installer, we're a nonprofit, so we don't officially, endorse installers, but we've worked with lots of them across the state. So I'd be able to help point you in the right direction, and just going to put my email in the chat. Next question here. We live off grid. So what if we don't have an electric bill for the last 12 months? We have no power right now.
Okay. Say that again. Is it a business or an ag?
It doesn't specify. I'm not sure if are people able to unmute, or they just have to type in the chat?
I don't think folks will be able to unmute, but yeah, can definitely type clarifications in the chat or the Q&A.
So, well, one of the requirements of the REAP grant is that you have been in business for at least 1 year. So, if you had a generator, that's still energy used. You could calculate that. If all you want to do is try to build a large solar array and sell to the grid, some people do that too, but you do need to have an LLC or a business for at least a year before you can apply for REAP. And if you do a generation project instead of an offset project where you have a historic load, then you will have to work with the utility in advance to applying to find out what your rate will be that you can sell to the grid, where people who have that historic number can look at that to find their offset amount, their savings amount.
All right, hopefully that answers your question. Let us know if it doesn't, we can clarify. There was a question about the requirements. You had mentioned a 50,000 population cap. Emma just put in the rural eligibility map in the chat. Anything you'd like to add, Jesse?
No, just use the map is what we go on as well. So you can put your address in there and see if it qualifies. And again, that is just for businesses. Ag producers have a different way they can qualify themselves.
Thank you.
Yep.
Is ground mount?
Oh, I was just gonna say, some ag producers, 51% of their income does not come from ag. And so if you have a business license as well, you can apply under your business if you're in a rural area.
Thanks. Rebecca asked, is ground mounted solar a possibility with a REAP grant?
Yes, yes. So when we talk about that environmental regulation, a large ground mount system, I would reach out to me and discuss what you're thinking about doing. If you're just doing a fairly small ground mount system next to an existing building, kind of in a parking lot, like elevated solar for parking, for shade, something like that, it's usually not a big deal for our environmental. When it is a big deal for environmental is when you are like turning a large field into a solar field, or substantial change to ground disturbance.
Yeah, let me chime in with a couple of things there too. Obviously, there are certain circumstances where you're going to need building permits and that sort of thing to be able to install a system like that. But one thing that I've seen around the state, and this is true, I'm sure, around the country, in ag operations, frequently you'll have a kind of remote site where you'd really like to have well operations or other things that are going on that require power. And it can be a heck of a lot cheaper to be able to install solar and set up your own power situation in a remote site like that than it is to pay for the lines that you have to bring cross country to try to get power to that location. And that can be a huge, huge plus as you're developing something in a rural area like some of our areas here in Arizona.
Yeah, Tom, that is a lot of our applicants are rural well sites that do not have power to them, electric grid power. Yeah.
And there's certain processing that I've seen too, and with some ag producers as well, where that kind of remote site processing would be a really key for operation.
Yeah, in REAP, we're not scared of off-grid at all. In fact, off-grid will often score well because it's more expensive, to haul a generator and fuel in or something.
Yeah, no, and I've seen a couple of cases like that where it was just an unbelievable bill where they're charging by the mile or by the foot to try to bring power to that remote location. To be able to establish your own power development in that location might be a much, much better option.
Wonderful, thank you guys. I think it looks like I'm caught up on the Q&A. If folks have more questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Jesse, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the new priority points for underserved communities in the REAP application.
Yeah, that's really important. Actually, I might want to put those two links in. I don't have them teed up right now, but we can send them out afterwards, right? To include them in. Okay, so there's two main maps right now that are kind of have been updated. People who have used REAP for a long time are familiar with them, but the way they're incorporated into the scoring has changed because of the IRA and the Justice 40 initiative that's hoping to provide a lot of this assistance to underserved areas. And so we have a map. And so again, it's kind of like the eligibility map for population. You can just put your address in and see if you fall in the area that will get 15 points automatic on the score sheet if you are in an underserved area. So for the people not in an underserved area, that does mean this may become a more competitive competition for you. And then we have another opportunity to get priority points. So this, the second opportunity is not in the main score. It's like a bonus area that can be up to 10 points awarded. And that comes in a variety of ways. It's also for underserved populations and underserved areas. So not just if you fall on the map for being in an underserved area, but if you are a minority group. And then there's also veterans will get extra points. Disaster areas. I'm not current if we have any of those in Arizona right now. And then we have our kind of like a long-term population decline and low employment map. And that's a whole separate map. So those would be ways that an application would receive an extra 10 points at the end based on those priorities. And also, if you just navigate with Google to the USDA Rural Development site for REAP, if you go to the Apply tab, I believe when you scroll to the bottom, those maps are linked at the bottom there as well. And we call them, the keyword that we call them on the website, I believe, are key priority points is also maybe a term that would get you there Googling it, but we're send a link out after this in our thank you email.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to circulate those links. Jesse, do public schools qualify for REAP grants? And what about nonprofits?
No, only rural small businesses that are for-profit and ag producers. There is a very complicated mechanism in which some people have tried to use REAP for nonprofit reasons, where a separate business LLC comes in and actually owns the solar and sets up a power purchase agreement and sells it to the school. That is a possibility, but I would like to say that the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, has put a lot of money into a lot of government agencies right now, and it might be easier to just look to the DOE or the EPA or the education or transportation for some of those types of projects, than try to, create a whole business mechanism for using REAP for the school, although it is possible.
I think we're kind of winding down on questions. I'm wondering if Tom and Jesse, you want to share any closing thoughts, any best advice, or anything else you'd like to share to kind of round us out?
Jesse?
Well, I guess, I try to answer my phone, respond to people. One of the things I hear the most is that it's unusual for people to have a government program that talks to them. But we talk to you. So ask questions. Don't spend a lot of time on this if you think you might not be eligible. We would rather you call us and determine that you have a good project and that you are eligible before you spend time on it. One of my big goals is to set good expectations and not disappoint people.
Jesse, is it all right if I put your email in the chat?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I've already threatened to send your email out to a lot of people that don't know about this program. One of the keys something she touched on, I think that's really important. Our Arizona USDA Rural Development Department is incredibly cooperative. I've done a number of different grant applications in different programs, not just REAP. And invariably, the staff in Arizona has been very, very helpful. And the point I think is well taken. One, take a look at what your situation is, what you think your needs might be. I mean, right away, before you even think about going after something, see what you need, see what might really be of benefit to you. Clearly, with a REAP grant, finding a good installer is going to be important. That's going to be your partner in putting the project together. If you need a grant writer, I mean, that's something I've done for quite a while. There are others out there quite willing to help. The trick is to do it in a timely fashion. The way these grants operate now, there are a series of deadlines. And REAP once upon a time was like once a year, maybe twice a year. Now it's like every quarter. There's a number of different approaches that allow you to kind of get into the queue to make something happen. But it's been my experience, when you've got some questions or some kind of those nagging doubts about, does this really work, or what do I have to do? Talk to Jesse, talk to somebody at USDA. My experience has been that they are very helpful, very willing. In that old, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you joke doesn't really apply as a joke here. They mean it. And so I found their office to be really something special to work with. The other thing I found in her comment about talk to your neighbors, generally when people are taking advantage of solar programs and alternative programs and various other programs out there that really help to preserve some of our assets around the planet, they tend to be a little more outgoing and a little more friendly about the project that they've undertaken. So if you're curious about a project, don't be bashful about talking to someone who has done it. I mean, it's not hard to spot a solar array. They're pretty obvious out there. And yes, there are places where you're going to have, like I say, zoning issues and so on that you may have to deal with. But the great bulk of the state of Arizona is rural. Take a look at the map. Trust me, there's not a whole lot of urban territory compared to the number of square miles out there that really make it eligible to do a program like this. And if you're doing ag or you're doing any kind of business operation, and bear in mind, that's what this was written for. This was not set up to be a residential program. This is set up to be someone who's generating business, and it's a business cost that the USDA is really working to lower and take that pressure off the grid. And with the kind of temperatures and so on that we're dealing with right now, the more we can take off the grid, the better, frankly, to keep that AC running for someone like Adrian sitting in Phoenix, where it's a little warmer than it is in some of our areas up here in northern Arizona. But this program really works. And something I've seen with the people I've dealt with, it has made a big difference to their bottom line. It makes a big difference to their daily operation. And it's something that it's easy to support because it really works. And, I'm happy to help anybody just understand the program. I think it's a great program.
You're a great salesman, Tom.
Well, you do a great job, so it makes it easier.
Well, yeah, I just make sure everybody knows that it is competitive. So we don't want to promise it, but yeah, you're a really good salesman for REAP.
Well, no, I will say something about that. When I first came across the program, it was kind of invisible. Not that many people really understood what was out there. And so yes, it's a competitive grant, but the competition wasn't that bad because a lot of people just didn't know about it. So there weren't that many applications. As it has become more and more successful, more and more people now know about it, and it is competitive. And that's also the point you made earlier. Make sure you don't start your project before you submit your application, because once the application is in, you can't, it's the cart and the horse here. You've got to have this thing set up properly. But it's a program that really RELA is designed to help make it work. It's designed to actually do something, and it works.
All right, Tom, Jesse, thank you very, very much for joining us tonight. Thank you, our wonderful attendees, for joining us. That concludes the webinar. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.